William here again, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing another CD based console that I've had a number of requests for. This one is the Sega Saturn, released by Sega in 1994 in Japan and 1995 pretty much everywhere else. Now the Sega Saturn was released more or less at the same time but slightly before the Sony PlayStation, and Sony and Sega had a bit of a console war between the two, and sadly for Sega I should say, the Saturn lost. I think overall it sold around 10 million units or less, whereas the PlayStation 1 or the PS1 sold around 100 million worldwide, so big difference there. The Sega Saturn is not one that I had when it was first released, because between Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation I myself did choose the Sony PlayStation. Although a friend of mine that lived around the corner from me did get the Sega Saturn pretty much as soon as it was released, and we used to play Virtua Fighter 2 on it a lot, which is a really good replica of the arcade game, and I enjoy that even to this day. So here we go with the Sega Saturn. Okay guys, so this is the Sega Saturn console itself. Very basic controls on the front, as you can see here. Power button, open and close, and your reset button. So if we open, there's where your CD will go for your game. And at the front you've got your two very basic controller ports. There they are, for focusing a bit better there. There we go, and now I'll show you around the back of the console itself. Okay guys, so this is the rear of the Sega Saturn. The only real thing that's worth focusing on here is these three inputs here. I'll bring those a little closer so you can see those. Now the inputs themselves, this one here is just your AC adapter, which I'll show you in a moment, but it's just a basic AC adapter so you can plug it in and play. This one is for your connection to your television. You can either do it by RF or SCART lead. The one that I have is for SCART lead, which is a much better connection. And this third and final one is very seldom used. The main reason for it is something that was only really used or released in Japan, which was to connect it to floppy disks, a system that was only released in Japan, so you can connect it to floppy disks and save your game data onto there. Another use for it as well was so that you could link two Sega Saturns together, so that you could just, you and a friend can play a game against each other, having your own television each rather than having to have a split screen on the game, that sort of thing. So there we have it. Now I'll just quickly show you the accessories themselves. Okay, now although I did say a moment ago it would be accessories, I did mention that in a previous video that I will be showing accessories exclusively in another video. So I'm not really going to be showing you accessories with the Sega Saturn, not for now at least. So these are just the basic things that you need to get it working. First of all, your AC adapter, so there's the input for the power, your connection for your TV, SCART lead, and your Sega Saturn controller. Really good controller, the Sega Saturn. I really do like it. In fact, I actually prefer the Sega Saturn controller over the Sony PlayStation controller. Now there is one other final thing about the console itself which I didn't touch on before, and it is in relation to saved games, so I'll show you that now. Okay, one last thing which I didn't touch on before in relation to the console itself is this here, which if you have a look in there, looks like a cartridge port. It looks like you would put maybe a Mega Drive or a Sega Genesis game in there, and you're half right. It is a cartridge port, but it's not really for putting games in there. It's very similar to the compartment at the back that I touched on a moment ago, where you could save games onto floppy disks. This cartridge port is exclusively used for saving games onto cartridges themselves. Now bear with me, I may be slightly incorrect about the actual amounts here because it's been a while since I've used the Sega Saturn itself, but the internal memory of the Saturn allows you to save, I believe it was 32 kilobytes of data for your saved games, which sounds like a very minute amount compared to these days when some games will take entire gigabytes to save. But I believe that was what the internal memory of the Sega Saturn allowed you to save. And you could get, again, it was only really used in Japan, you could get cartridges for saving your games onto cartridges. which would go in there. Not just saving games though, there were some games which were released, and again I could be incorrect on this bit, so let me know if I am, but there were some games that were released exclusively in Japan that the Sega Saturn didn't actually have enough internal memory inside the system itself to be able to play the games, even though the games were built for the Sega Saturn. So it required, these types of games required a specific cartridge for that game to also go in here, as well as the CD game to go in there. Again, I don't think it was released over here. I've not got one of those. I've never used one. I've never actually seen one. I suppose I could probably find one on eBay. But as of yet, at least, I don't really intend to do that. So that's it. That is the Sega Saturn. A really, really nice console. It's just a shame that it was beaten by the Sony PlayStation. Again, it's a shame for Sega. But we all know what came after the Sega Saturn. They didn't give up quite yet. Sega came back with the Dreamcast, another console to be featured in another video. So won't go into that one too much. And that's it. That's the Sega Saturn. Hope you like it. Okay guys, now this is Virtua Fighter 2. My favourite game in fact for the Sega Saturn itself, and it was also Sega Saturn's biggest selling game, most popular game of its day. As you can see, when compared with a PlayStation game, the cases themselves are a lot bigger, they're a lot longer, reasonably the same thickness, roughly the same, and at the back you can see some screenshots of the game. A lot of people will disagree with me on this, but I actually prefer Virtua Fighter 2 over the Tekken games, which was what came out on the PlayStation. And Virtua Fighter 2 again wasn't as popular as Tekken, but I certainly preferred it. So here's the games themselves, or the game itself. Here we are. So not too much to show, just a CD game, very similar to the PlayStation, in fact identical in appearance to PlayStation games, so there isn't too much to show. And just the manual itself, most of it not in English, but it's a very thick manual for a basic fighting game. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed the Sega Saturn review. Okay guys, that was a brief review of the Sega Saturn. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be covering the accessories that you could get for the Sega Saturn in my future accessories video, so keep a lookout for that one. It will be here at some point soon. I just need to finish off my review of the consoles first. So, in summary, definitely worth picking one of these up if you can get a hold of one. They're still not incredibly difficult to get hold of. You'll most likely find one on eBay, so if you can get one, I definitely would recommend it. In my view, it's almost as good as the Sony PlayStation. Very different games that came with it as well, so pick one up. If there are any things that you think I got wrong, or any information that you want me to clarify or anything about this video, by all means leave a comment, but please support the show by rating this video. And thanks again. Until next time, take care.